Ballers, please welcome Jonny Budget from the Budget Guitar Show, here to talk to us about the Sex Pistols. What's up, Jonny Budget?
Hi, Dennis. It's good to see you down there.
You recently did a show about one of the Sex Pistols gigs that I thought was fascinating.
Fight night at the Nashville. Yes.
Fight night at the Nashville, and I was like, man, this guy really knows his stuff. I'm going to see if he'll come on, because I have a bunch of questions about the Sex Pistols. So if you don't mind, I'll just jump into them. Did the Sex Pistols invent punk rock?
No, they didn't. John Lydon will always say that the Sex Pistols did invent punk rock, but no. I think the sound of punk rock was there back in the 1960s with bands like the Kinks, the Who, early Rolling Stone, maybe even, dare I say this, early Beatles of the Cavern era. But I think what happened was, particularly in this country, music was becoming very, very boring. You had the prog rock movement, which was basically taking a fan, dumping them in a field, playing for 2 hours and only playing 5 numbers. And then when they'd gone, they left you in that muddy field. You had a pleasant experience and you went home. What I think the Pistols did was bring rock music back to the kids on the street and giving them lyrics and ideas that sparked something off in their head that grabbed an interest. Anarchy in the UK is a far better rallying cry than the 6 Wives of Henry VIII on Ice. I think that's what happened. And of course, before the Pistols, just before, you had the Ramones album filtering in, Iggy and the Stooges.
Right, yeah.
People call Iggy the godfather of punk. And yes, I believe so. That featured I Want to Be Your Dog, which of course Sid covered a lot. When Raw Power came out in 72, I believe it was, it sounded raw. It sounded raucous. Those kids at the time getting that on import, and especially because David Bowie produced it, they were hip to that. You had bands like the Small Faces and all of that, which were really louty and yobby. But I think the Sex Pistols just fell into the kind of way they performed and the way their style was. I don't think they invented it, but I think they popularized a kind of notion that you can do it yourself. As Sid famously once said, all you have to do is pick up a guitar, hit a string, go twang, and you've got music. Then just have something to back it up lyrically. So, they didn't invent it. And as for all of this, was it invented in America? Was it invented in the UK? I don't think anybody can lay a definitive claim to that, apart from maybe, to my mind, Little Richard and Chuck Berry.
Jane County was DJing. Yeah. The story was told to me that they were at CBGBs, but really I think it was at Max's, because they didn't really have a DJ at CBGBs, but they did at Max's.
Yeah, that's right. Jane was the DJ at Max's.
And Jane played Anarchy in the UK, and it was insane. Like, there was a massive reaction in the room, and it was like a groundbreaking moment. And I thought it was really interesting to hear that was happening at Max's as a result of that record making its way over.
Max's, from what I know about the place, was a fantastic place to go. And also it featured very heavily in Sid's life. He did 4 gigs there that he played in a very short space of time in 1978. But the Max's thing, people like Jane County were hip to the Pistols because they'd already come to the UK. They then took that back over there and said, this is what they're doing in England. The Pistols were seen as a political thing. In England, anarchy in the UK, well, we all know that anarchy will not work in the sense that a lot of anarchists think it will. The true definition of anarchy, John Stuart Mill, anarchy is doing what you want as long as you do not cause harm to others. That works. But when you start breaking laws, that is causing harm. I think for the Pistols, it was about a change. Once they'd released Anarchy and the Bill Grundy show, and they saw what was going on, something clicked, and it was, if we say something, it's going to get people thinking, because people are starting to form bands in our image. That was how they affected a change, rather than being anarchistic.
So they were not anarchists.
No. I don't believe they were. I mean, Steve Jones and Paul Cook and Glenn, they wanted to be a rock and roll band. They wanted to play and get girls and, you know.
What guitars did Steve Jones and Sid Vicious use?
Seeing as I knew you were coming today, I've actually put them on the wall here. Steve Jones's guitars. Here we have the white Les Paul Custom, which was nicknamed Excalibur, with the saucy 50s pin-up ladies on. That was a 1974 version that was actually originally owned by Sylvain of the New York Dolls. I believe it was given to Malcolm McLaren by Syl when Syl was supposed to be coming over here to join the Sex Pistols, but of course that didn't happen. So the guitar was given to Steve. This is a copy I had made for me, and it is exact to most of the minute details.
Wow.
And then in 77, the Swedish tour, and for recording the Nevermind the Bollocks album, he used a black Les Paul, a 54 this is, with P90 pickups, but Jonesy's actually had staple pickups in the bridge, and this is a 54 reissue, and it has the sticker on it for the Swedish motorcycle group that came to one of the gigs and gave Steve and Sid the sticker.
How did you get that? Did you have it? Did you have the sticker printed, or?
Yeah, I actually had to get that made from a very, very small image, a copy. I managed to send that over to Steve, and he said, yep, that's the one that I had. The other main one for Steve on the American tour in 78 was the Gibson Firebird.
Oh, cool. Wow, that's massive.
Those are the three Steve Jones main guitars. We come to the man himself.
Sid Vicious.
Sid Vicious Fender Precision bass with the sticker on it. I think it was a 72. There you go. That's the main.
Wow, there you go. Those are the guitars of the Sex Pistols. And they were big Who fans, and like you said, the Faces and stuff like that. There's a myth that sort of the Sex Pistols couldn't play their instruments. And I mean, maybe Sid was learning, but there was a real musicality to what they did.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, Steve Jones openly says that when he got pushed out onto guitar, he took a load of Black Bombers, Speed, and he put on Iggy Pop records and the Ramones records, and he just played and played and played until he could make a sound that didn't sound bad. He might not have known what the chords were, what the names were, but he knew the position and where that sound was. So when it came time to actually playing, Paul used to practice quite a lot with the drums. Glenn, he could already sort of play, you know, to his standard because he'd been practicing. The myth about them not being able to play their instruments, I think, really does come from the Malcom side of things, because they had a singer who couldn't sing. By the time they went out gigging, they were as good as any pub band you could go and see. And then once the album came along, there was a lot of overdubs on the album. Steve had gotten better by then, and they emerged into being a fantastic rock and roll band, which Malcom didn't want, hence booking a tour of the Deep South in 1978. He wanted to ruin the band because they'd actually gotten good and they were being given plaudits.
That Deep South tour was intentionally to destroy the band?
Yeah, it was, because Warner Brothers at the time were saying, look, if we got you guys in New York, you would sell out. If we got you guys in LA, you would sell out. Well, Malcom didn't want that. He wanted those sort of Deep South towns where things that the Sex Pistols were saying or doing were frowned upon. And that is why a lot of the audiences, there were some kids in there, but there were a lot of the archetypal cowboys in there, you know, who didn't like some of the things that they were saying. And that particular clip from the Longhorn Ballroom, a guy comes up to Sid and holds a knife at him, so Sid hit him over the head with a bass. Well, that guy went there purely to cause a storm in front of the Sex Pistols. So then he could be interviewed on the local TV news and saying, oh, they're this, they're that, they do this, they do that. Malcom was loving all of that. He wanted the controversy.
I always thought that, he was doing that, to cause controversy, but it was in an effort to sell more records and to generate more success rather than to...
No, he at that point in time, 78, he didn't want the band to have big success because they were turning into a rock and roll band. And if you look at Winterland, the final date on that tour, it was being played live on the radio. It was being filmed by Warner Brothers.
Yeah, Ballers, you can hear that whole show. It's a record that was released.
That's right, many, many times. The band were playing to the biggest audience they'd ever played to at that point. It was a rock and roll show. Malcom tried to disrupt it. That was the only gig on that American tour that he was actually there for. He tried to anger the promoters, a band that was outside. They were called Negative Trend, who later became a band called Flipper in the 80s. And Malcom was outside and he said, as soon as the Sex Pistols finish, you guys jump on stage and play. That didn't happen. Basically, the Pistols finished with no fun, and at that point, the curtains came down and Greensleeves was played to get the audience out, and this band ran onto the stage as if they were going to play. So Malcom was just trying to upset the fact that they were becoming what he didn't want them to become. Steve and Paul wanted to be in a rock and roll band.
Didn't he make money off the Sex Pistols?
Malcom did, but he ended up putting all of the money into the Great Rock and Roll Swindle. Obviously, John had left by that point and had enough. The band was fragmenting. In 1979, John started a lawsuit against Malcom for the money, and it took until 1986 to get that resolved. And when Malcom knew that he was going to lose that court case, he went to the bank. He took all of the money out in cash. He put it into his socks. He put it in everywhere he could, all over himself, and got on a plane to Paris. So when people ask Malcom, where did all the money go? He took it with him. They didn't make money at all from the Pistols until that court case. In 1986, the band's name, they were in debt to millions of dollars, all that had to be settled. And the 1996 reunion tour basically was for the band members to make some money.
Yeah. Because
up until then, they hadn't.
Did they ever play CBGBs?
No, they didn't. Those kinds of places, they didn't play CBGBs, they never played Max's, they never played, the Mercer Arts Centre was gone by then. No, they never did. Sid played Max's 4 times in 1978, and some footage of that has recently just come to light.
What's the best show, live show the Sex Pistols did that was captured on as a recording, do you know?
The best show, if we're talking pre-reunions, live at Chelmsford Prison in 1976, that's a good one.
So they did play at a prison?
Yes, they did. Chelmsford Maximum Security Prison in September 1976.
That just like Johnny Cash and like the Cramps playing at the mental hospital.
Yeah, the Sex Pistols one was that particular day. Paul Cook had quit his job as a trainee electrician in a brewery. He'd gone out with some work friends prior to being picked up to go to the gig, so he was basically drunk by the time he got there. And during the drum intro to Satellite, you hear him fall back off his chair, off his drum stool, and then he had to be placed back on it, and he continued with the gig. It's a great show. The recording quality is good. Obviously, there's not a lot of audience on it because the prisoners were told, sit there, shut up, don't do anything. So there isn't atmosphere there, but the band play really well. The Burton-on-Trent gig as well, from the same time period, that is electrifying as a rock and roll show. That really is good. That's available under various names: Better Live Than Dead, Indecent Exposure, Live in the North of England. It's been released hundreds of times.
Why did the Sex Pistols break up after one album?
Malcolm McLaren, basically, he had disrupted things so much, he threw away this great rock and roll band. They'd all had enough by that point in January 78. Sid was doing his drugs. Paul and Steve wanted to be in a rock and roll band. John wanted to take things further and really go a bit public imagey with it. But Malcolm sensed that they were becoming stars. He was just a manager, and his ego wouldn't allow that. So he disrupted everything, played one person off against another. Band have arguments, they split up. As we see now, 3 of the members are all fine with each other, and one of the members doesn't sit with them. There will never be another reunion.
Why did they refuse induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
This was because they were all okay with being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until, firstly, John noticed that some handwritten lyrics, which were supposed to be his, were fake. They weren't his handwritten lyrics. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame said the 4 band members can come, but if you want to bring wives, girlfriends, partners, managers, it's going to cost you, I think it was $25,000 a plate. That was what annoyed John mainly. They said, right, that's it, we're not coming. So Steve and John wrote this thing together. They didn't turn up. I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is all well and good. And, you know, it was great that they recognised the Pistols. But when you consider some of the stuff that is fake that they have, you know,
it's crazy that they had the fake. I had no idea that happened. They got lyrics for God Save the Queen, which were not in John's hand. Are they still there?
And they claimed it. Apparently so. And apparently they're placed right near the lavatory, the toilets in the building. Yeah.
Check out Jonny Budget's show, The Budget Guitar Show, on YouTube. It's a fantastic program. And thanks so much for coming on, John.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I really, really hope that lots of people like this video.
Thanks, and I hope they like the one that's about to appear right over my head. It was selected just for you by YouTube's team of friendly robots, so it's relevant, ballers, to your interests.